Hello and welcome back. You're watching Parry This. Today we are taking a crack at arguably the most famous leader from the First Crusade, that being Raymond of Toulouse. If you haven't already, I invite you to check out the many interesting videos I have already completed in this series, and also to subscribe to see all the ones that are yet to come. But let's dive on in and figure out what this guy was all about. So as a quick and short TLDR, Raymond IV, sometimes called Raymond of Saint-Gilles or Raymond I of Tripoli, was a powerful noble in southern France, and one of the leaders of the First Crusade from 1096 to 1099. He was the Count of Toulouse, Duke of Narbonne, and Margrave of Provence from 1094, and he spent the last 5 years of his life establishing the County of Tripoli in the Near East. So for those of you who are still here, let's get into early life. Raymond was a son of Pons of Toulouse and Almaudus de la Marche. He received Saint-Gilles with the title of Count from his father, and displaced his niece Philippa, Duchess of Aquitaine, his brother William IV's daughter, in 1094 from inheriting Toulouse. In 1094, William Bertrand of Provence died, and his title of Margrave of Provence passed to Raymond. A bull of Urbans dated 22nd July 1096 names Raymond as Raymond, Count of Nimes, Toulouse, and Rouergue, and Margrave of Provence. Raymond was deeply religious and wished to die in the Holy Land, and so when the call was raised for the First Crusade, he was one of the first to take the cross. He is sometimes called the One-Eyed, after a rumor that he had lost an eye in a scuffle with the doorkeeper of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre during an earlier pilgrimage to Jerusalem. The oldest and the richest of the Crusaders, Raymond left Toulouse at the end of October 1096, with a large army that included his wife, Elvira, his infant son, and Adhemar, Bishop of Lipoi, the papal legate. He ignored requests by his niece, Philippa, to grant the rule of Toulouse to her in his stead. Instead, he left Bertrand, his eldest son, to govern. He marched to Dyrrhachium, and then east to Constantinople along the same route used by Bohemond of Taranto. At the end of April 1097, he was the only crusade leader not to swear an oath of fealty to Byzantine Emperor Alexius I. Instead, Raymond swore an oath of friendship, and offered his support against Bohemond, a mutual enemy of both Raymond and Alexius. He was present at the Siege of Nicaea and the Battle of Dorylaeum in 1097, but his first major role came in October of 1097 at the Siege of Antioch. The Crusaders heard a rumor that Antioch had been deserted by the Celtic Turks, so Raymond sent his army ahead to occupy it, offending Bohemond of Taranto, who wanted the city for himself. The city was, however, still occupied, and was taken by the Crusaders only after a difficult siege in June of 1098. Raymond took the palace of the Emir, Yagi Sian, and the tower over the bridge gate. He was ill during the second siege of Antioch by Kerboga, which culminated in the controversial rediscovery of the Holy Lance by a monk named Peter Bartholomew. The quote-unquote miracle raised the morale of the Crusaders, and to their surprise, they were able to rout Kerboga outside Antioch. The lance itself became a valuable relic among Raymond's followers, despite Adhemar of Lipoi's skepticism and Bohemond's disbelief and occasional mockery. Raymond also refused to relinquish his control of the city to Bohemond, reminding Bohemond that he was obligated to return Antioch to the court of Emperor Alexius, as he had sworn to do. A struggle then arose between Raymond's supporters and the supporters of Bohemond, partly over the genuineness of the lance, but mostly over the possession of Antioch. As we should all know by now, Bohemond did in the end secure Antioch as his own and decided to stay here. Many of the minor knights and foot soldiers preferred to continue their march to Jerusalem, and they convinced Raymond to lead them there in the autumn of 1098. Raymond led them out to besiege Ma'aret al-Numan, although he left a small detachment of his troops in Antioch, where Bohemond also remained. As Adhemar had died in Antioch, Raymond, along with the prestige given to him by the Holy Lance, became the new leader of the crusade. Bohemond, however, expelled Raymond's detachment from Antioch in January of 1099. Raymond then began to search for a city of his own. He marched from Ma'arat, which had been captured in December of 1098, into the Emirate of Tripoli, and began the siege of Arca on 14th of February 1099. apparently with the intent of founding an independent territory in Tripoli that could limit the power of Bohemond to expand the Principality of Antioch to the south. The siege of Arca, a town outside Tripoli, lasted longer than Raymond had hoped. Although he successfully captured Hizn al-Akrad, a fortress that would later become the important Crac de Chevier, his insistence on taking Tripoli delayed the march to Jerusalem, and he lost much of the support he had gained after Antioch. Raymond finally agreed to continue the march to Jerusalem on the 13th of May, and after months of siege, the city was captured on the 15th of July. Raymond was offered the crown of the new kingdom of Jerusalem, but refused it, as he was reluctant to rule the city in which Jesus had suffered. He said that he shuddered to think of being called King of Jerusalem. It is also likely that he wished to continue the siege of Tripoli rather than remain in Jerusalem. However, he was also reluctant to give up the Tower of David in Jerusalem, which he had taken after the fall of the city, and it was only with difficulty that Godfrey of Bouillon was able to take it from him. Raymond participated in the Battle of Ascalon, soon after the capture of Jerusalem, during which an invading army from Egypt was defeated. However, Raymond wanted to occupy Ascalon himself rather than give it to Godfrey, and in the resulting dispute Ascalon remained unoccupied. It was not taken by the Crusaders until 1153. Godfrey also blamed him for the failure of his army to capture Arsuf. When Raymond went north in the winter of 1099 to 1100, his first act was one of hostility against Bohemond, where he actually captured Laodicea from Bohemond, who had just recently captured it from Alexius. From Laodicea, he went to Constantinople, where he allied with Alexius I, Bohemond's most powerful enemy. Bohemond was at the time attempting to expand Antioch into Byzantine territory, and blatantly refused to fulfill his oath to the Byzantine Empire. Raymond was, of course, part of the doomed Crusade of 1101, where he was defeated at Mercivan in Anatolia. He escaped and returned to Constantinople. In 1102, he traveled by sea from Constantinople to Antioch, where he was imprisoned by Tancred, the regent of Antioch during the captivity of Bohemond, and was only dismissed after promising not to attempt any conquests in the country between Antioch and Acre. He immediately broke his promise, attacking and capturing Tardis, and began to build a castle on the Pilgrim's Mountain, which would help in the siege of Tripoli. He was aided by Alexius I, who preferred a friendly state in Tripoli to balance the hostile state in Antioch. Raymond died on February 28, 1105, before Tripoli was captured. Raymond IV of Toulouse was married 3 times, and twice was excommunicated for marrying within forbidden degrees of consanguinity. His first wife was his cousin, and the mother of his son Bertrand. His second wife was Matilda, the daughter of Count Roger I of Sicily. Raymond's third wife was Elvira, the illegitimate daughter of King Alfonso VI of Leon, the Spanish king who also campaigned furiously against the Moors. And their son is Alfonso Jordan. He was succeeded by his nephew William Jordan, who in 1109, with the aid of King Baldwin I of Jerusalem, finally captured Tripoli and established the county of Tripoli. William was deposed in the same year by Raymond's eldest son, Bertrand, and the county remained in the possession of the Counts of Toulouse throughout the 12th century. Raymond of Toulouse seems to have been driven both by religious and material motives. On one hand, he accepted the discovery of the Holy Lands and rejected the kingship of Jerusalem. But on the other hand, he could not resist the temptation of new territories, which would constantly drive him to be warring with both his brothers and the natives in the Holy Land. So I guess that's all there is to know about this guy, or at least all that I could find about from him from what seemed to be reputable sources. There were lots of stories about him and the other leaders that come across as gossip, or tales told around the water cooler about how they were constantly betraying each other. From what I have read, I think the dynamic of the 3 I have covered thus far is this. None of them really loved each other, but Raymond and Godfrey liked each other more than either of them liked Bohemond. Which makes a lot of sense because if you watched my Bohemond video, you would know that he was somewhat of a fiery personality. Well, in any case, that's all for today. So, thanks for watching and have a nice day. And if you go ahead and subscribe, then I'll see you next time.
Shoe and shoeless. One is meaningless without the other.